Very good morning to all of you with the second day's lecture, which will be on dynamics of inviscid flows. Now, I would like to emphasize on the two keywords. So, dynamics of inviscid flows. So, the two keywords are dynamics and inviscid. So, in the kinematics, uh, we discussed about motion without giving any relevance to the forces behind the motion. Here, in addition to the motion, we will also be bothered about the forces which are influencing the motion. And inviscid flows, by inviscid flows what we are basically meaning is that a flow where viscous effects are not important. So, a flow where viscous effects are not important might be a flow where viscosity is identically 0, or even if viscosity is not identically 0, still viscous effects may not be important. So, we will consider those examples in details where uh, inviscid flow analysis is important, uh, and I am going to first derive the basic equations that describe the dynamics of inviscid flows. So, equation of motion for inviscid flow in Cartesian coordinate system. Equation of motion for inviscid flow in Cartesian coordinate. So, let us say that we consider a control volume with the axis coinciding like this. So, this is the x axis, this is the y axis, this is the z axis. Now, instead of considering this as a control volume, could also consider this as a packet of fluid. The difference is, if we consider this as a control volume, we cannot directly use the Newton's law of motion, because Newton's law of motion is for a control mass system, not a control volume system. But we consider this as an element of fluid, then we can use the Newton's second law of motion on it. So, let us say that we consider this as an element of fluid, and let us say that we are identifying various forces acting on it along the x direction. So, we are writing forces along x direction. So, remember that over this element of fluid there could be forces along x direction, y direction, z direction, whatever, but what we are doing is, for convenience, we are showing only forces along x direction. This this fluid element has 6 faces. Now, we have to keep in mind that because it is inviscid flow, there is no shear, because shear stress is related to the viscous nature of the fluid. So, if the viscous nature of the fluid is not important, shear stress is not there, and also there is no viscous normal stress. Therefore, only normal force due to uh, the motion of inviscid flow may be due to the pressure of the fluid. So, let us identify various dimensions of this control volume. And let us say that we apply these forces this is P into this is pressure times delta Z times delta Y. On this side P becomes P plus del P del X into delta X plus higher order terms which I am not writing. So, on this fluid element these are the only forces which are acting along the X direction. In addition you have these are the only surface forces, but there is also another type of force which is body force. So, in continuum mechanics you have these two types of forces, one is surface force, another is body force. Surface force, by the name you understand that it is a force which is acting on the surface, and by the name body force you understand that it is a force which is acting over the volume of a body. So, if that be the case, then body force can be expressed as per unit mass or per unit volume. I am showing it by a different color here. Let us say that Bx or B is a vector which is body force per unit mass. So, the body force along X, what is this? Rho Bx into delta X into delta Y into delta Z, that is the body force along X. So, now if we write the Newton's second law of motion for the fluid element, resultant force along X is the mass of the fluid times acceleration along X. So, what is the resultant force along X? To delta Y into delta Z minus actually plus higher order terms are there. So, I am writing some dot 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 which are higher order terms in the Taylor series plus rho Bx delta X delta Y delta Z is equal to rho A. Now, rho Ax into delta X delta Y delta Z, because rho into delta X into delta Y into delta Z, this is the mass of the fluid element. Next what we do is simplify this equation. I will do it in the next page, but just to uh, use this, these two terms are cancelled. So, we are left with maybe I can write one more line in this page, minus del p del x into delta x into delta y into delta z plus higher order terms plus rho bx delta x delta y delta z equal to rho ax delta x delta y delta. Now, what we can do, we can cancel this delta x delta y delta z, because these are all small tending to 0 but not equal to 0, and here there are terms which are of the order delta y delta z or higher orders. So, if you take the limit as delta x delta y delta z tends to 0, this will, therefore you are left with minus del p del x plus rho bx equal to rho ax. This is the equation of motion where viscous effects are not there, and ax, we have derived an expression for acceleration along x in the previous lecture, and ax is nothing but so you can write so if we now in fluid mechanics, it is customary to put the acceleration term in the left hand side. So, we can write the equation of motion along x direction, which we also call as x momentum equation. Okay. Similar equations you can write for force balance along y and z direction. And the z momentum these are called as Euler's equation of motion along x, y and z direction in the Cartesian system. So, Euler's equation of motion essentially talks about equation of motion for inviscid flow, that is there is no viscosity or there is no viscous effect. Let us try to write these equations in a compact vector form with a single vector equation. So, if you now uh, multiply I cap this with j cap and this with k cap and add. What is I cap, j cap and k cap? These are the unit vectors along x, y and z direction. So, x momentum equation I am multiplying by I cap, y momentum by j cap and z momentum by k cap and adding. So, what we are getting out of this? Now, this term is what? This term is V dot with the nabla operator u. How this term is V dot of nabla operator with u? So, I am just expanding it. V is ui plus vj plus wk dot with del x I del x plus j del y plus k del z u. So, this you will get u del u del x plus v del u del y plus w del u del. So, this is v dot nabla v and this is v dot nabla. So, you can write this as rho v dot nabla ui plus vj plus wk. The right hand side minus is okay. So, I have not written anything very new. What I have done is essentially I have uh, vectorially added the x, y and z components. Vectorially add. Let me write one more step in this page. So, you can write this is the velocity vector v. This is the velocity vector v. So, you can write this is nothing but by definition gradient of E, and this by definition is the body force per unit mass E. So, this equation that I have written here, the last equation, this equation is the Euler's equation of motion along uh, in a general vector form. What is the advantage in writing it in vector form? Advantage is writing it in vector form is that the vector form becomes coordinate system independent. So, you can use this form uh, in general and write the corresponding versions in different coordinate. We write as Euler's equation of motion in vector form. Earlier three forms were the three scalar component forms, now it is vector form. Okay. So, I would like to mention that whatever we have discussed so far covered by page number 1 and half of page number 2 of the lecture notes that I have provided you for this particular chapter. The next part what I will do is whatever is given in the write up, I will try to simplify that calculation a little bit. So the motivation is, from the Euler's equation we want to derive the Bernoulli's equation, which is one of the very classical equations in fluid dynamics, and I do not know about anybody who has studied fluid mechanics but have not heard about Bernoulli's equation. Nowadays even in school level studies it is taught, and classically it has been one of the building blocks. I mean, the beauty of the Bernoulli's equation is of course of its simplicity and algebraic nature, and it has been used for solving wide variety of practical problems even when it is not actually applicable, but with suitable correction factors the equation has been used because of its very simplistic appeal and obvious physical implication. So we will try to see that how we can arrive at the Bernoulli's equation from the Euler's equation. So let us write the Euler's equation afresh here. Now we will use a vector identity. Okay. So now uh, this vector identity we will use here. Can you recall what is this? This is the vorticity vector, which physically talks about the rotational nature in the flow. This is in fact twice the angular velocity which we discussed in the kinematics lecture. So we can write so leaving the pressure gradient term in the left hand side, if we now write so what we have done is we have taken these three terms and this term four terms in the left hand side and one term in the right hand side just for algebraic manipulation purpose, nothing more serious than. The next step is we will make a dot product of this dl. What is dl? I will come in a moment because already it is multiplied by rho. What is dl? dl is a differentially small vector in the flow domain. So, dl is something like this. So, let us do it term by term. Grad p dot dl. What will be this? This first term. So, this is del p del x into dx plus del p del y into dy plus del p del z to dz. So, this is dp. So, this term becomes dp. Next, we will calculate the next term, that is half del p dot v dot dl. So, half del v dot v or half nabla v dot v, it is nabla of p square by. So, this is so this becomes d of v square by 2. So, the first term is dp, second term is rho d of v square by 2, and now let us calculate the third term, that is rho b dot minus rho b dot dl. So, body force, what is the body force? Let us set the coordinate axis in such a way that z is vertically upwards and gravity is vertically downwards. In that case, Bx equal to 0, Ey is equal to 0 and Bz is equal to minus g. So, B dot dl is minus gk dot dxi plus dy j plus dzk. So this is minus G dz. So we can write dp from the Euler's equation, the first three terms we have simplified. So we can write dp plus rho d square by 2 plus rho g dz. Actually there was a minus, with that minus and this minus it becomes plus rho del v del t dot del. Now we make certain simplification. So first of all, before doing everything else, we divide by rho. So dp by rho plus d of v square by 2 plus e dz. Now we make certain assumptions. What are the assumptions? We first make an assumption that it is steady flow. If it is steady flow, then this del v del t term is equal to 0. Then we are left with see, we are slowly getting towards an equation where only these three terms will be important, and therefore we will now investigate the situations when the right hand side becomes 0. So question is, when does so this clearly can be written in terms of a determinant with u v w okay. So one possibility, I think the most trivial possibility, the vorticity is a null vector, that is irrotational flow. So if this is 0, then this row of the determinant becomes 0 and then the determinant itself becomes 0. The other possibility is that one of the rows is a scalar multiplier of the other row. When it is possible? It is possible when dl is along a streamline. Then what you have is dx by u is equal to dy by v is equal to dz by w. If you call each equal to k, then one of these rows is k times the other. So dl is along a streamline. There is a third possibility, E cross omega is perpendicular to dl. You can choose a dl such that E cross omega is perpendicular. So what we can infer from here is something which is interesting. The right hand side, the term in the box can become 0 with these three possibilities. So if either of these possibilities are there, either of 1, 2 and 3 remains valid, then you are left with dp by rho plus d of v square by 2 plus g dz is equal to 0. If rho is a constant, then what you get is as follows. Then you integrate this between 1 and 2. What are the special considerations of 1 and 2? We will discuss in a moment. So, this is the famous Bernoulli's equation. Okay. So, 1 and 2 have to be points which will satisfy either of these, but for irrotational flow this could be anywhere. See, for if the flow is not irrotational, then dl has to be chosen in a particular way. So, 1 and 2 has to be located in such a way that either it is along a streamline, on the same streamline, or they are located along a direction which is perpendicular to v cross omega. If it is irrotational flow, it could be any points 1 and 2. So, in the Bernoulli's equation, the points 1 and 2 are constrained to be along a streamline under normal circumstances, but if the points 1 and 2 are such that the line joining them is perpendicular to v cross omega, then that line joining 1 and 2 need not be a streamline, or the points 1 and 2 could be anywhere. They might not be along a streamline if the flow is irrotational, because then the right hand side becomes 0. That is the requirement to make this equation converted to Bernoulli's equation. So, that is possible with any arbitrary choice of the locations of 1 and 2 only if it is irrotational flow, that is this is 0. Otherwise, if the flow is rotational flow, then obviously you need to take into account the particular direction, and streamline is one such possible direction. So, I will come to the physical interpretation of various terms in the Bernoulli's equation in a moment, but let us recapitulate what are the assumptions under which this equation remains valid. So, the first assumption with which we started, the first assumption is that it is inviscid flow, that is the first assumption. Second assumption, so inviscid flow is the basic premise of this chapter. So, this we cannot forego, or this we cannot forget while deriving any equations in this chapter. In addition to inviscid flows, we also made an assumption that it is steady flow, so that the term del v del t dot dl, that if you retain that term, we can show that it will do nothing else, but it will get converted to a modified Bernoulli's equation which includes unsteady terms, and which we will do it in a moment. So, that we will call as unsteady Bernoulli's equation, but normally we are dealing with the steady version of the Bernoulli's equation. So, inviscid flow, steady flow, and out of these three conditions, any one has to be satisfied, either irrotational flow, or the points 1 and 2 are located on the same streamline, or they are oriented in such a way that v cross omega is perpendicular. So, now let us see what is the physical meaning, and then we will go for explaining the unsteady term or accommodating the unsteady term. But first we will consider implications And another important assumption which I mentioned to forget, which I forgot to mention, is that this rho, uh, this rho is a constant. Otherwise, you have to integrate dp by rho by taking rho as a function of. If rho is not a function of p, then of course you can treat it here as a constant, and then you can write this as p2 minus p1 by rho. So, rho equal to constant is another assumption. So, physical implications of various terms in the Bernoulli's equation. So, first we will consider this equation. So, this is what is considered as a very standard form of the Bernoulli's equation, where everything is expressed in terms of unit of length. This clearly is height, so it is expressed in terms of unit of length, and all other terms, because these are of the same dimension, all these are units of length. So, what do these physically represent? So, let us do it one by one and try to show that what these terms physically represent. Let us first write this term v1 square by 2g. So, this you can write as half or v square by 2g, forget about 1 or 2. So, half mv square by mg. So, half mv square by mg, what is this? This is half mv square is kinetic energy. So, this is kinetic energy per unit weight. Similarly, Z is mgz by mg. So, this is potential energy per unit. So, all these terms are energy per unit weight, which is called as head. Energy per unit weight called as head. The term P by rho g, what does it represent? So, this is kinetic energy, this is potential energy. Very often uh, that P by rho g, this is called as like pressure energy per unit weight, but pressure energy is a very vague term, not quite clear what do we mean by. So, let us try to interpret this P by rho g. So, let us take an example where you have a pipe and water is entering the pipe or any fluid is entering the pipe. Let us say that there is a displacement of the fluid delta x. So, in presence of pressure, the work done to maintain the flow, A is the cross sectional area of the pipe, P into A into dx or delta x here, whatever. So, that work per unit weight is P by rho g. So, what does it represent? It represents the work to maintain the flow in presence of pressure. So, this is an equivalent energy that the fluid must possess so that it can maintain the flow in presence of pressure. Per unit weight, this work is expressed as flow energy or flow work. Flow energy or flow work. So, pressure energy is not a very good terminology for this. Flow energy, the terminology itself explains a part of the meaning, that it is the energy or the work done to maintain the flow in presence of pressure, and that is normally expressed per unit weight of the. So, the Bernoulli's equation is essentially saying that sum total of kinetic energy, potential energy and flow energy remains conserved, stored at a particular location, or is it transmitted. So, it is not actually stored at any location, but this energy is continuously being transmitted. So, let us take a practical example or analogy. Let us say that there is a conveyor belt. You will find conveyor belts commonly in railway stations, airports and so on, where you say put a, so once you put a suitcase gets transferred from one location to the other. So, this suitcase, you can take analogy that this suitcase is like a packet of energy and the conveyor belt is a flow medium. So, this energy, as this suitcase is being continuously transmitted from one place to another place, similarly energy is continuously transmitted from one place to another place with the kinetic energy, potential energy and flow energy remaining conserved, sum total of this remaining conserved. So, that constraint of course follows from all the assumptions that we have made. So, clearly the question is that can we use the Bernoulli's equation for practical devices, and this is an outstanding question in the practical applications of fluid mechanics. I would not get into the straightforward use of Bernoulli's equation in practical devices, which you will find in any book, no matter how bad or how good the book is. You will find that the book will detail some practical applications of Bernoulli's equation in the context of, for example, flow measuring devices or velocity measuring devices. So, some common devices where the Bernoulli's equation will be applied will be orifice meter, Venturi meter, Pitot tube, etc. So, all of you, since you already have a basic exposure to fluid mechanics, you already know what these devices are and how straightforward to use Bernoulli's equation for these devices. But I will raise a very basic question. Do you think that Bernoulli's equation is really applicable for these devices? See, one of the basic premises of the Bernoulli's equation is that the flow has to be invisible, that viscous effects are negligible. Now, this orifice meter, Venturi meter, Pitot tube, they are normally linked with pipe flows, and in pipe flows the viscous effects are very, very important. So, is it not a contradiction that there is a device where viscous effects are not important, still we are using Bernoulli's equation, and an equation which is intrinsically valid under certain premises, and one of the very important premises is that the viscous effects are negligible. Well, to answer this question or to resolve this apparent paradox, we have to think in a little bit uh, uh, carefully, a little bit careful manner. Uh, you have to understand that when we are dealing with these devices, or when engineers started working with these devices, in those days it was impossible to compute the flow in a pipe or in a channel through uh, the CFD technique when these devices were first introduced. So now if you want to design these devices, how will you do that? Because uh, you are not able to solve the viscous flow equations analytically for these devices. So what to do? So engineers are very practical people. Engineers will always find out and way out. So engineers, what they inferred from the prevailing conditions is that, okay, we understand that Bernoulli's equation is not really applicable for these devices. So what we do is we apply the Bernoulli's equation, and together with the continuity equation we solve the velocity field, and also we find out the flow rate, and then we put a correction factor. We put several correction factors. So once we put these correction factors take into account the non-ideality of the flow. So there are several such correction factors like coefficient of velocity, coefficient of discharge, which is CD. So these coefficients take into account the non-ideality of the flow. So the philosophy of using Bernoulli's equation for these devices is that we all understand that Bernoulli's equation is not exactly applicable, but simplicity of the Bernoulli's equation enables to come up with a first hand answer to the design of these devices, and then we can apply suitable correction factors. Now question is, where from these correction factors will come? So these correction factors actually come from rigorous experiments with these devices. So that is a little bit old fashioned approach of designing these devices. Still these devices are being designed by using Bernoulli's equation in many practical industrial applications, but a more modern approach could be that one could analyze the flow within these devices by using computational fluid dynamics, and then uh, a very accurate estimation of the flow rates can be obtained. However, Bernoulli's equation does not lose its classical nature, and the beauty of this equation is its simplicity. So with such a simple equation, we can solve many problems with certain practical with certain assumptions, and we can use certain correction factors so that these assumptions can be suitably relaxed. And if those correction factors are known, or there is a chart or a table that describes the correction factor, for example CD as a function of Reynolds number or whatever, then it may be possible that by using Bernoulli's equation and a correction factor table or chart, it is possible to design the devices very accurately. And the chart, correction factor chart, for that one has to do either CFD or one has to do experiments. But the good thing is that only one set of experiments or only one good set of CFD simulations can enable you to develop these charts, and once these charts are developed, this can be applied for a wide range of problems if the charts are expressed in the form of suitable non-dimensional numbers like the Reynolds number, for example. So this is the perspective that I wanted to give you. Instead of drawing a venturimeter, drawing a pitot tube, drawing an orifice meter and writing routine things which are there in the textbook, I wanted to give you this insight which you can supplement with the reading of the textbook to get a deeper insight on applicability of Bernoulli's equation in practical device. So let us see how far we have progressed in terms of the lecture notes that I have provided you. So we have covered uh, up to I think uh, page number 4 of the lecture notes, and then I am slowly coming into the page number 5, where we will now consider the unsteady flow along a streamline. So, these are some special cases. Unsteady flow along a streamline. Okay. So, unsteady flow along a streamline, which will be basically dP by rho plus half dV square plus dz, plus there will be an additional term sorry, the rho we have already divided by rho, this is equal to 0. This is the unsteady term that we dropped by assuming steady flow, but this is something that we now want to add and see what is the effect. So, along a streamline means dl will be along the streamline coordinate ds. So, if you have a streamline like this, ds will be the streamline coordinate, and uh, so ds we can write the scalar ds times the unit vector along the streamline. What is v? This is v into unit vector along the streamline. In this context, I tell you one thing, out of so many issues, why do you think that we always ponder upon streamline? So, we could discuss many other types of lines, but in the context of describing flow, we are often very happy in referring to the streamline. Question is why? So, I want to give you a bit of perspective about it. See, the flow in general, any flow is 3 dimensional, but if you are trying to express the flow by a single coordinate, because by definition velocity is always tangent to the streamline. So, by using a single curvilinear coordinate, which is the streamline coordinate, you can make the flow treatable like a one dimensional. So, that is why the streamline is a very important entity in the context of discussing fluid mechanics. So, now let us complete this exercise. So, this dot product is so this is del V del T ds. So, now if you integrate this equation between the points 1 and 2, so dP by rho So this leads to E1 by, if rho is constant, plus V1 square by 2 plus GZ1 is equal to P2 by rho plus V2 square by 2 plus GZ2. So this one additional term makes this equation unsteady Bernoulli's equation. So this is something that normally you may not be covering in the undergraduate courses, but I would say that you please encourage your students to also understand that Bernoulli's equation does not always mean that it is restricted to steady flow. The form of the Bernoulli's equation that we teach to undergraduate students is of course primarily for steady flow, but we can extend the Bernoulli's equation with this additional term to make it applicable for unsteady flow as well. The next example that the next special case 2 we talk about is unsteady irrotational flow. So unsteady irrotational flow, again you have the special term for the unsteady flow del V del T dot dl. So for irrotational flow, E is gradient of the scalar phi. So this is so you can write I del phi del x dot dxi becomes del phi del x dx plus del phi del y dy plus del phi del z dz. So this is del del t of d phi. This is as good as d of del phi del. So the Bernoulli's equation or the Euler's equation becomes dp by rho plus E of v square by 2 is now grad phi square by 2 plus g dz is equal to minus d of del phi. This is this is for irrotational flow. Now there is another subtle point which I want to mention before we work out a problem, and The subtle point is that there are many flows which are originally irrotational. Irrotational form of the Bernoulli's equation has to be applied at all times. That means a flow which is originally irrotational, where is the guarantee that it will remain irrotational forever? For example, for a fluid entering a pipe, if you consider a uniform velocity profile, this velocity profile has no curl of this velocity if it is uniform. So does it mean that the flow in the pipe is irrotational flow? The answer is not. So why? What makes the flow rotational here? What makes an irrotational flow rotational? There are many factors, but one important factor is the viscosity of the fluid. So viscosity of the fluid. So what happens? Because of the effect of the wall tries to slow the fluid down, and hence the fluid tries to topple. So it is very similar to the situation, say you are in a bus and you want to run out of the bus or jump out of the bus. The ground wants to slow you down, and therefore you have a tendency to topple as you are running out of a bus. So very similar, if you are having a viscous effect, that will try to uh, create rotationality in the flow even if the flow was originally irrotational. There are several other effects which could make an irrotational flow rotational, like thermal stratification, Coriolis force, shock wave, etc. But because of interest in time, I do not want to get into the details of. Next, what we will do is we will straight away try to work out example 2.1, which is given in page number 6 of my lecture notes. Example 2.1. So there is a velocity field and there is a body force which is given by this. So you have to find out the pressure field given the velocity field, given P is equal to P0 at P equal to P0 at x equal to 0, y equal to 0 and z equal to 0. Of course, this is a steady flow. We assume A is not a function of time. Let us try to see that how we can use Euler's equation to solve this problem and what are the new physical insights that we get out of the Euler's equation. Minus del P del x, Euler's equation, plus rho Bx is equal to rho Ax. This is steady flow, so this is 0. U is this and V is this. So U del U del x is U is Ax, del U del x is A, V is minus Ay and del U del y is minus A and this is 0. So and Bx is 0. So minus del P del x is equal to rho A square into x minus, sorry, I have made a mistake here, del U del y is 0. So del U del y is 0, U is Ax, so del U del y is 0, although V is there, but del U del y is 0, that means this is just rho A square x, okay. So minus del P del x is rho A square x. So this is Euler's equation along x. Similarly, Euler's equation along y, minus del p del x, sorry, del p del y plus rho by is equal to rho del v del t plus u del v del x plus v del v del y plus w del v del z. So del v del t is 0, u is ax, del v del x is 0, v is minus ay, del v del y is minus a, and this is 0. dy is 0. So minus del p del y is equal to rho a square y. So now if you integrate this, you will get p is equal to minus rho a square x square by 2 plus a function of what? See, this is what we are doing, this is called as partial integration. So if you do integration with respect to x, any function of y and z is like a constant. Similarly, if you integrate this, this is a function of x and z, and the Euler's equation along z direction minus del p del z plus rho bz is equal to rho del w del t plus u del w del x plus v del w del y plus w del w del z. So these are all 0. W does not come into the picture, and bz is minus g. So these essentially, see, the acceleration term becomes 0 for the z momentum equation. So this essentially becomes like fluid statics problem. Okay. So that means you can write del p del z minus rho g. So if you integrate this, p will be rho g z plus function of x y. Now this p, this p and this p, they are the same. So if you compare them all, you will get the f1, f2 and f3, and that will make you arrive at the final answer. P is equal to minus rho a square x square by 2 minus rho a square y square by 2 plus, sorry, this is minus rho gz, I think I have missed a minus sign, yes, and plus sorry, minus rho gz plus a constant. So you can write P. Now what is this? This is half rho a square x square is small u square and a square y square is small v square. So this is essentially half rho v square. E plus half rho V square plus rho Gz equal to constant. So essentially we have got a condition where we are using the Bernoulli's equation, we are arriving at the Bernoulli's equation. One important fact that we have considered here is that we started with the Euler's equation, that means we assume inviscid flow, this is very important, and because we assume inviscid flow, you will see that this is a special case where the flow is also irrotational. Why? This is where kinematics, understanding of kinematics comes into the picture. So u is equal to ax and v is equal to minus ay. So del u del y is 0 and del v del x is 0. So that means you can say both the shear as well as the angular velocity as 0. Why? Because the shear, the rate of deformation is what? Del u del y plus del v del x, that is 0, and the angular velocity is half of del v del x minus del u del y, that is also 0. So it is, because the shear is 0, it is inviscid flow. So even if you say that we do not assume inviscid flow, but the nature of the flow itself tells that there is no shear strain. Because there is no shear strain, although the fluid may have non-zero viscosity, effectively there is no viscous stress. This is a very interesting problem, where even if you are not told about the viscosity, the nature of the strain itself is such that there is no shear strain and therefore there is no shear stress. So shear strain is related to shear stress with viscosity, but if viscosity is non-zero but still shear strain is 0, then the shear stress becomes 0. There is no rotation also, that means it is rotational flow. Because it is irrotational flow, you can apply Bernoulli's equation between any two points in the flow field, no matter whether they are connected by the same streamline or not. So now what is the physical nature of this flow, or what are the streamline natures? So if you see, you have the flow like dx by u is equal to dy by v, which is equation of streamline. So dx by ax is equal to dy by minus ay. So if you integrate it, ln x is equal to minus ln y plus ln c, that means xy equal to constant. So the streamlines are like rectangular hyperbola. So physically, how will the fluid evolve here? So you may have a large volume of fluid or an element of fluid. What is del u del x plus del v del y, by the way? This is a minus a is equal to 0, that means it is incompressible flow. If it is incompressible flow, then what happens? The fluid element will remain conserved in volume as it evolves. So this element, when it comes down, its length increases and height decreases, but its volume remains conserved, and the streamlines, they follow this xy equal to constant. There is no angular deformation and there is no rotation. So this is what is the entire physics of the problem is captured by this simple type of exercise. So I would encourage you that instead of solving routine types of orifice meter, venturi meter, pitot tube type of problems given in all kinds of books, it is also important that you try to solve a problem of this kind in the class, where the entire kinematics, dynamics or viscous effect, all these interconnections become clear through this illustrative example. Now, so we have covered up to uh, page number 7. So, the final agenda item of today will be deriving the Euler's equation of motion in streamline and cross streamline coordinates. Okay. So, Euler's equation of motion in streamline and cross streamline coordinates. Let us say that we have a streamline like this. Now we take a fluid element that is coaxial with the streamline. So we are trying to identify various forces assuming inviscid flow. So Euler's equation, by that definition we are considering inviscid flow. So let us try to identify the forces acting on it. So let us say gravity is vertically downwards. So and let us consider that this curvilinear length is delta S. So this is P into A, where P is the pressure here, and this is P plus del P del S into delta S plus higher order terms that I am not writing into A. There is a body force also. So this is rho A delta S is the mass times G, and let us say this angle is theta. So geometrically you can obtain the angle theta by constructing this right angle triangle and assuming that the difference in elevation between the centers of the two sections is delta Z. So you can write from geometry that cos theta is equal to delta Z by delta S by referring to this right angle triangle. Now let us write a force balance for this. So resultant force along S is equal to mass of the fluid element times acceleration along S. So P into A minus P plus del P del S into delta S A minus rho A delta S G into this component along S is cos theta is equal to rho into A into delta S into AS. So now these terms get cancelled out. So you are left with minus del P del S. So A also gets cancelled out from both sides, and delta S also. So minus del P del S minus rho G cos theta is delta Z by delta S, and take the limit as delta S tends to 0 is equal to rho AS. So in the limit as delta Z tends to 0, delta Z delta S will be the partial derivative of Z with respect to S. So we can write minus del P del S minus rho g del z del s, and higher order terms will become 0 as you take the limit as delta t tends to 0, delta s tends to 0, is equal to rho as is del v del t plus v del v del s. So this is something, so why like this is because locally the streamline coordinate is like a one dimensional coordinate, spatial coordinate, only s coordinate is there. Similarly, so uh, similarly uh, we can do it for the cross streamline coordinate. So for the cross streamline coordinate, cross streamline is n coordinate. So what is n coordinate? So if this is the streamline, s is the streamline coordinate and cross streamline is n. So minus del p del n minus rho g del z del n delta z by delta n is equal to rho a n in the limit as delta n tends to 0. So minus del p del n minus rho g del z del n is equal to rho a n. What is a n? Because of the curvature of the streamline there is a acceleration, and this r is the radius of curvature of the streamline. If there is no gravity effect, then minus del p del n is equal to minus rho v square by r. So this is something very interesting, that if you have curvature in a streamline, you are likely to have a pressure gradient just because of the curvature effect of the streamline. So if you are using a manometer to measure the pressure drop, make sure that you connect between streamlines which are nice and parallel, because if they have curvature, by nice I mean straight. So if they are having curvature, then there has to be a correction in the pressure difference because of curvature of the streamline, which normally do not take into account for manometric calculations. These are certain fine points that we need to consider. So we have come almost towards end of today's session. So we have covered up to page number and we will conclude with an example, which is example 2.2. So I can project that example on the screen. It has already been worked out in the notes and it is a very simple example, but I want to just uh, highlight this, that in this example what we are essentially doing is we are trying to find out the pressure difference between a inner and outer radius of a pipe bend, where uh, the velocity is approximately given by an irrotational flow, where v is v theta, which is equal to c by r. So v theta equal to v is equal to v theta is equal to c by r. So this is a free vortex or an irrotational flow. So then you can use the Euler's equation. This is the normal coordinate here, because it is a circular geometry. So n and r, the radial coordinate, they become equivalent. So dp dr in place of dp dn is rho v square by r. So this r is the radius of curvature of the streamline. So if you now integrate it, you will get the pressure difference by noting that v is c by r. So let us summarize what we have learned today. We have learned the Euler's equation. Starting from very fundamental force balance considerations, we derived the Euler's equation in the Cartesian system, then in vector form. Then we tried to convert the Euler's equation to the Bernoulli's equation, and in the process we made certain assumptions along with the derivation. The Bernoulli's equation we also introduced for unsteady flows, and we explained the physical significances of various terms in the Bernoulli's equation. Then we uh, discussed about Bernoulli's equation or the Euler's equation in streamline and cross streamline coordinates, and we also gave perspectives of certain practical applications where these equations could possibly be used, although fundamentally the restrictions are not applicable, and how to apply correction factors to those considerations. We also have worked out a couple of illustrative practical problems. I hope this session was useful, because in this particular session I tried to supplement the book instead of what is given routinely as a textbook material in the chapter of Bernoulli's equation. I tried to discuss something which you will not normally find in all textbooks. So I hope that this interaction was useful. Again, I want to remind you that the title of this course is Concepts of Fluid Mechanics. So it is not that how to apply a formula to solve a problem. It is how to develop a conceptual understanding of the basic premises of fluid mechanics. And today also I have tried to give enough emphasis on this. So thank you very much for attending this session. Now there are certain questions which have come up during the chat session. Uh, uh, so far my teaching assistant of this chat session, Mr. Shayan Das, was addressing those questions, but because I have a few minutes left I can address some more questions. So first question, can we apply Bernoulli's equation between two streamlines in a fluid flow? So two streamlines between, basically by this you mean two points located on two different streamlines. I think that is what you mean. So that you can apply only if either the flow is irrotational, or if the line joining the points is such that that vector is perpendicular to V cross the vorticity, V cross omega. So if these are the two conditions satisfied, either of these two conditions, then you can apply between any two points, no matter whether they are located on the same streamline or not. This I clearly discussed in my derivation. Somebody has uh, given that show the first law of thermodynamics for a streamline in steady incompressible frictionless flow is same as Bernoulli's equation for such a flow. As if you are giving me a exam question to solve. See, if you want to see this derivation, you have to know the details of the first law of thermodynamics. Not only that, you need to know the second law of thermodynamics. So I would suggest that very recently I have offered an NPTEL online MOOC course on laws of thermodynamics. Here I have actually solved this question. So if you are interested, go through those lectures, but I would say that please do not try to just reproduce your exam questions or whatever problems you are not able to solve and say that show that this, show that that. This is not the way in which you should attend this kind of lectures. So you must understand that there are additional backgrounds for this material, and these additional backgrounds are essential, like first laws and second law of thermodynamics, which is not a part of this course. That is why I have not covered this. If you are interested, please go through the books of thermodynamics or online materials of thermodynamics, and you will get an answer to this, and my own NPTEL lectures on laws of thermodynamics. Please look into that and you will get an answer to this. In next question is, in derivation of Bernoulli's equation on page 4 of notes, page 4, let me see, we obtain equation 2.8 by integrating previous equation. In that case, why didn't we consider constant of integration? Oh my god, this is definite integral. In definite integral you do not consider constant of integration. Like constant of integration is for indefinite integral. in definite integral already two limits are there. So why do you consider a constant of integration? The constant of the integration gets cancelled out when you are putting the two limits. The next question is, how would you write Bernoulli's equation for a real fluid considering real fluid is viscous? First of all, for viscous flow Bernoulli's equation is not applied. So if you want to apply Bernoulli's equation, you have to apply particular correction factors. Next question, how can we can derive velocity potential from Euler's equation? Velocity potential is defined for irrotational flow, there Euler equation does not come into the picture. I have shown that how Euler's equation becomes how Euler's equation can be expressed in terms of velocity potential. That does not mean that velocity potential can be derived from Euler's equation. For ideal fluid, the next question, for ideal fluid the value of viscosity is 0. This fluid does not exist, but is there any real fluid where viscosity is nearer to ideal fluid? Yes, there are many fluids where the viscosity is quite low, and yes, those fluids resemble to ideal fluids. Now by looking into the chat, there is another question, can we apply Euler's equation to two different pipes which are having turbulent flow? Two different pipes, how this come into the picture, I do not understand. See, like one pipe is a physical entity in which fluid is flowing, another different pipe, another fluid is flowing. So how do you connect these two different pipes? And I really do not understand this problem. So I would encourage you to ask questions, but I am expressing my inner feeling from inside that by looking into the questions I am finding that most of you are having serious conceptual difficulties in fluid mechanics, and please try to rectify that. Before teaching your students, try to rectify your own understanding. This is very important. These questions themselves are reflecting that you have basically very minimal idea about the basic concepts of fluid mechanics, and then you are interested in learning advanced things, that is not compatible. So please try to go through the very basics of fluid mechanics, and I hope that this interaction was useful in terms of uh, building the basic foundations of fluid mechanics. Thank you very much for attending today's session. I will be happy to interact with you again tomorrow at the same time, 10 o'clock in the morning. Thank you.